This episode is brought to you by Hostfully, a company that helps you make beautiful guidebooks for your listing. Make your own at hostfully.com/pad. And as a special for Get Paid for Your Pad listeners, you'll get a free guidebook consultation after you make your guidebook.
Welcome to Get Paid for Your Pad, the definitive show on Airbnb hosting, featuring the best advice on how to maximize profits from your Airbnb listing, as well as real-life experiences from Airbnb hosts all over the world. Welcome. We are your hosts, Josefa Kapadia and Jasper Rivers.
Get paid for your pad. 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 Get paid for your pad.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Get Paid for Your Pad. And today I have a guest all the way from Boulder, Colorado. Her name is Zeona McIntyre. I had to practice that name a few times to make sure I got it right, but I think I got it right this time. So Zeona, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, you're doing good.
Okay,
well practiced.
Great. Awesome. I'm very happy.
Yeah.
So me and Zeona, we met at the Airbnb Open in Los Angeles, and she told me that she has been Airbnb host for a very long time, about 4 or 5 years, and she also manages other people's apartments. So we're going to talk all about that. First, we will start off with, sort of your experience. How did you get into Airbnb? And then the second part of the interview, we'll talk more about the management side of your business, and in particular about how to invest with the intention of renting out an Airbnb. I think there's a lot of people right now who are very interested in doing that because the return on investment is pretty good with Airbnb, and it's very hard to get good returns on investment elsewhere. So that was a long sentence. I'll give it back to you now. So tell us about how you got started with Airbnb. How did you get it? How did you get into it?
Yeah, so at the time I was in massage school and I wasn't looking for something else to do. I was like getting ready to start a massage practice and finish that. And a friend of mine told me that he got laid off of his job in New York City. And he was like, well, I heard about this Airbnb thing. I'm going to start renting my apartment and use my unemployment to travel. So he was telling me about it and like bothering me about it, just saying like, I got to do it. I got to do it. And I'm like, I don't have time for this. I don't know why you're bothering me. But after a year, I can't believe I waited that long. But after a year, he told me I made $50,000 on my apartment. And I was like, okay, I'm listening, So from there, I decided I was just losing a roommate and I had a spare room in a 2-bedroom apartment in Boulder. And I was like, well, I have furniture. Let me just try it. It's a pretty low risk situation. If, it doesn't work out, I'll just get a roommate. So it worked out so well that I was renting that room. I was renting my room. I was staying with friends. I was like all over the place until I ended up getting another apartment. And yeah, I started leasing apartments and then re-renting them, which I don't really recommend, but I think that's how a lot of people got started back in the day until I could afford to buy a place. And then that kind of spiraled into buying 3 more in a really short period of time. And now I kind of help people figure out how to analyze a good area and find the market that they need and then buy places that are going to work really well for Airbnb. And I figured out a really cool method just to do it all from afar. So you don't necessarily have to even visit the town or anything. So yeah, I think it's worked out well for me.
That sounds really interesting. I think I have a lot of questions to ask based on
Sure.
what you just said. But I want to start with, you started renting out your spare room back in 2012, you said?
Yeah.
I know when I started in 2012, I couldn't find very much information about how to be a good host and how to optimize your listing and stuff. How did you do this? Did you just try and figure everything out yourself, or was it challenging to get started?
I don't think it was that challenging. I've always been a people person, and I did a lot of couch surfing in the past. So I don't know if people are familiar with couch surfing, but it's a website where you get to open your house and invite people to stay with you for free. And, I don't know how well they're doing anymore because now people can charge for that. But I did that for a couple of years, and I had a ton of people come visit me, and I'd go stay in their homes. So I had a little bit of an idea of like what I wanted as a guest. And I was really just interested in meeting the people that came through the door. It's turned out to be like a very serendipitous thing. It's like you just met the people that you were supposed to meet, and you had those really wonderful adventures. So I actually kind of miss that part of Airbnb because now all of my places are remote or they're full units or full homes. And so I actually don't meet guests very often.
So now you're renting out multiple places.
Mm-hmm.
How many places do you have?
I own 4, and I'm managing probably 15 total right now, but I've got a lot on the back burner. So I think it'll be growing pretty quick here.
Right. So you started with your spare room, and then you expanded into, you were leasing apartments and then, re-renting them out on Airbnb, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Are you still doing that or?
No, because, I found that I was living in fear all the time. It was like you always thought somebody's going to rat you out or you're going to get caught or, I think there are better ways to do it now. Now that I manage homes for people, it just feels so much better to have them in on it and the consent of it all. And I just think that's a better way to go. But, the way I rationalized it when I was doing it is that there's a lot of students here in Boulder and they just trash places. And I was getting the place cleaned all the time and I was like really loving on it. And it was just, I was paying the rent on time. Everything was good. So I felt like I was a good tenant for those times, but I'd rather not be in that space anymore.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so did you inform the landlords that you were doing Airbnb or not?
No.
Okay.
But so I had been kicked out of 2 places in my experience in Airbnb, and it actually didn't go over as hard as I thought it could. But the funny thing with one of them is when the guy caught me doing Airbnb and said I couldn't do it anymore, I got a girl to take over my lease. And a couple months later, I saw that my landlord was doing Airbnb on his home, and the girl who took over my lease was renting that apartment again on Airbnb. And I was just like, you can't stop the system, so whatever.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, that's pretty funny. So, but this is interesting because, there's still a lot of people out there, I think, who are, leasing apartments and putting them on Airbnb. And some of them do it with the permission of a landlord, which I definitely recommend that because then, you don't have to worry about anything. But at the same time, it can be hard to find people who will let you do that because a lot of landlords, they don't really understand Airbnb. They think, oh, there's going to be some random people from the internet who go and like trash my place. But like you mentioned, I mean, I believe it's a win-win situation because as an Airbnb manager, like it's in your best interest to keep the place very clean, to keep the place very tidy and nice, because that's, that helps you get more business on Airbnb. So I actually think that, as if I was a landlord and I was to rent out my space to somebody, I would have no problem with that person doing Airbnb because I know that because of that, the place will be looked after very, very well. Whereas if you get a tenant and the person turns out to be a really messy person, then it's very hard to get somebody out. So if you get unlucky with a renter, then, good luck getting that person out of your house, right?
Yeah. Well, and now that I'm a landlord, like, I don't know, I feel like it's way safer to do short-term rental than long-term rental. And, people have mixed opinions about it. But in my experience now, it's like, yeah, it just feels really good to know that someone's going in and cleaning and checking on the place. And that if something goes wrong, it gets fixed right away. Because the longer something sits, the more expensive it gets. So yeah, it's a good method.
So I want to go back a little bit and talk about what happened when you got caught, because this is really interesting because you don't hear a lot of these stories because people either they don't want to tell them or it hasn't happened yet. So I don't know very many people who actually got, evicted or whatever it may be. So I'm really interested to hear, like, how did that whole process work and, what happened basically?
This is so funny because I feel like I've been hiding in the closet forever. And now I'm like putting myself out there and telling these stories, but they are fun. They're fun to share. So when I first got my first apartment that wasn't the one I was living in, I asked my dad for a little bit of money just to like help me front it because you have to put down a down payment and the first month's rent and get some furniture and the whole thing. So he knew what I was going to do, but he didn't fully understand it, you know? And my big mistake in that place was that I rented an apartment in a building that was like 9 units, but there was one landlord that owned the whole building. And so all it took was one of the other neighbors to rat on me because we all had the same landlord. And that's probably what happened, but I don't know exactly. And yeah, he told me that, you know, he found out about it and I had to stop doing it. And, you know, we negotiated a timeline that I could move out. And I just did Airbnb right up until the moment that I had to move out. And I took like 3 days and sold all the furniture. And it was like so easy. It just in and out, done. No harm, no foul. He didn't keep my deposit. Like, you know, they were pretty cool about it. They were just like, they didn't understand. You know, it was really early in the whole Airbnb movement. And that was kind of a turning point for me because I told my dad about it and I felt really like, I don't know, I just felt really bad. Like I've been hiding this whole time and I got caught and something really bad could have happened and nothing did. And I was just like, man, maybe I should just stop, you know? And I told my dad that and he was like, no way, go out, get another apartment and friggin' do this. And from then on, it was like no turning back. So.
Okay, so I mean, because this is kind of the worst case scenario, right? If you're leasing an apartment and then you get caught, but then you kind of got away with it, right? I mean, you didn't have to pay a fine, like you didn't lose your deposit, like he didn't like murder you or something.
Yeah, I think the worst case scenario is like you think, oh my gosh, what if you get hit with fines? What if you get taken to court or something? But in reality, I don't think people want to go through all that hassle. At the very least, like they could try to keep your deposit, but I think experienced landlords know that there's too much, like there's a lot of tenant rights. I think it would be really messy for them to explain that they were going to keep that, you know, unless there was actual damage, which there isn't. So I think it's a pretty safe move, unless you're playing with certain cities that have really big fines. Like I think New York City is putting on big fines and maybe Miami Beach. I've been hearing about that too. So you have to be careful with the cities because they don't care as much as the landlords.
Right. And also I think that, you know, if you rent a place solely for the purpose of putting it on Airbnb, then your risk is fairly limited because, you know, kind of the worst thing is you get evicted and then, you know, just find another place. But it's different when you live there. Because I know people who live in their own apartment and, you know, they would go out of town every weekend or they would travel a lot. And then they would put it on Airbnb, and that's more risky because then one day you can come home and find out that your landlord is evicting you, and now you don't have a place to stay.
Yeah, I guess that's never happened to me. I have rented the places that I was living in, but I kind of always had two going. Like as soon as I got an additional apartment, I would live between the two. I was really hustling when I started because I didn't want to have the overhead of paying for rent. And I knew that if I could get rid of that big chunk, then I would have a lot more freedom in my life. And so I did whatever I had to do. But yeah, I never actually lost the primary place. And I think I just always had the mindset that like, if something happened, I would just roll with the punches. So it's like, as soon as something happens, you just go get flexible and go, okay, I got to make a change now. And you just go out and get another apartment, you know? So it's not the end of the world. I think people make it out to be scarier than it has to be.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's generally the case in life. There's a saying for that. I think the devil that you know is better than the devil that you don't know, or something like that. I don't know if this really applies, but anyway, it's a cool saying.
Are you translating that? Like, was that like a Dutch thing?
No, actually, heard it in English. I think it refers to a situation where you're not really happy with the situation, but then you don't want to change it because you just don't know what's going to happen if you change it. It's like I think it applies a lot to people who are in corporate jobs that they don't really like, and then they're thinking, okay, well, I would rather quit and start my own business or, have a nomadic lifestyle. But then, they're kind of scared to do that because they don't really know what's going to happen if they do that. Like if they run out of money or like if they're going to be in the streets or whatever. And so, it's like the devil that you don't know is scarier than the devil that you know.
Yeah, I guess it's a certain kind of person for sure. But I've been a risk taker for a while. So bring it on.
It usually pays off taking a little bit of risk in my experience. But anyway, one more question about this until we move on to the next subject. So it's very interesting that you're saying, first of all, it worked out for you. You didn't really get in too much trouble. But at the same time, you don't really recommend it to people.
Well, I just think there's a better way to go about it now. Like I think that, like you said, it's kind of a no-brainer. More people know about Airbnb now. A lot of people have traveled with it. So I think if you see the side of being a traveler, you're a lot less afraid of the kind of people that it's going to attract in. So I think it's pretty easy if you can go to a landlord and say, hey, I know the city regulations and it's not a problem. And I'm going to give you X amount of percent, or I'm going to just pay you $500 a month more than the rent. And I'm going to take really good care of it. I'll let you know as things go on. And we can stop whenever you want or whatever. You just kind of reason with them. I think it's not a big deal. But
so that's how you go about it now?
No, now I've been doing it all pretty much word of mouth. I think just people around know what I do, and I've been telling more and more people about it. And so I get recommended clients all the time, and they already know. They are like, I either have a spare house or I'm going to go travel for 6 months, or, it's a lot of different scenarios. And they just don't want to deal with the hassle of doing all the management part, which, it's not rocket science, but it is a lot of moving parts. And so I completely understand, and I have a really good system set up, so I help people out with it.
Host, I can't emphasize how important it is to share recommendations of things to do or eat near your listing beforehand. Your guests won't have to go through TripAdvisor, Foursquare or Yelp. They won't have to scratch their head and think about possible places right in the moment. I've been using Hostfully to create an online and printable guidebook to show my guests my favorite coffee places in Amsterdam. They use my recommendations and I'm getting fewer questions from my guests as a result. I've also included screenshots of my guidebook on my Airbnb listing as a way to differentiate my listing from others. So make your own guidebook at hostfully.com/pad. Cool. So let's talk about that system, because you manage 15 listings or so, you said. So how do you? So this is all remote, right? You never meet your guests. So tell us a little bit about how you manage that.
Well, I think you have to build teams. It's the same with the real estate investment part, and it's the same with running a business. For a long time, I just tried to do it all myself. I was like, I just wanted to save as much money as I could, and I was being really frugal. And I was like, I can clean because I have all this free time now. I can manage all the listings. I can communicate with all the guests, and I'll just do it all myself. But that really stifled my growth. And so now I'm realizing like, wow, it's just about delegating, whether it's like a virtual assistant, or Airbnb has all of these business offshoots now that help you with cleaning or management or optimizing prices, and the list goes on and on. So there's a lot of tools out there. And I know you said like, the reason you wrote the book is that there weren't a lot of people out there saying what there was to do about Airbnb. And I didn't really know either. I just had to learn as I went. But you learn by making mistakes mostly and getting creative. But I don't know if I'm specifically answering your question, but like for guests that come from afar, I think having a really good house manual is helpful. And that I developed over a long time of people asking me the questions. And once someone asked me a question twice, I just made sure to put it in there so they weren't going to ask me anymore. So you kind of anticipate needs before they become an issue. And there's so much technology now about different lock boxes. They have ones that you can just leave a lockbox with a key. You can put digital codes on it You can have codes that you can change from afar from your phone. I mean, there's all kinds of technology now to let people in. So that's super easy.
Okay, so you use the lot boxes to allow the check-ins, so you don't have to show up.
Yeah, I mean, I use mostly the digital. They have like these automated deadbolts. So it's just like a keypad deadbolt. I like those the best because with a lockbox, people can actually lose the key, which is rare. But if they do and you're really far away, then you're like, oh my God, it's the worst thing ever. So it's always nice to have like a friend that has a spare or something like that. But yeah, that's the biggest thing. It's like if you have to run around trying to find a way to give someone a key, that just sounds like a lot of extra time.
Yep, absolutely. And these days there's a lot of these really cool locks, right? That you can manage them from your phone. You can even see when people have opened your door. And I know there's one called Remote Lock. I know there's one called Lockytron. I know there's one called Open Sesame. Are you using any of these or?
No, I'm a little bit low tech. I try to save money where I can. And so I've always been a little bit frugal. But yeah, there's people that do amazing things with all their technology. I saw a guy at the Airbnb Open that gave a talk about, electric blinds and automated lights and automated temperature in the shower. And I mean, just everything. I was like, wow, you can go all smart home if you really want to. But it's not needed either. So for people that would hear this and be like super intimidated, like, oh, I don't know all that stuff. It's like you can literally hide a key under a flower pot if you really wanted to. It's just, how does that reflect on the guest? Are they going to feel safe in that situation or not? So you kind of have to think about those things from both angles.
Okay, so that's the check-in. How about the sending messages? Do you send all the messages yourself or do you have somebody else do that or?
I used to. Now I have receptionists. I do virtual assistant stuff. So they help me out a lot. There are different services that you can use for automated messages and virtual assistants that will answer messages. There are times that I get a ping and it's something more specific and I'll answer it. But again, that's kind of like setting up the house manual where it's like, if you train people, they can figure it out. So based on the questions that get asked that people don't know how to answer, then you kind of turn it back around and give them that material. So it's like, you just have to be learning as you're going and actually recording as you do it. Nowadays, since I know I'm going to be training people all the time, anytime I do something for the first time when I'm just figuring out the kinks, I've got like a document open and I'm writing step by step how I'm doing it. Because then I can just share that document with somebody else and I don't have to go through it a million times. So you kind of save your time doing it that way.
Yeah, makes sense. Have you heard of Aviva IQ?
No, what's that?
Well, check it out. It's a new app, and what it allows you to do, it's an automated message sender. So if you can set all these conditions. You can say, if somebody reserves my listing, then after 10 minutes, send this message. And you can even use text to replace the names. So for example, if you can say like hi and then guest name, so that the app will automatically pull the name of the guest from the Airbnb platform, so that you don't you can actually personalize the messages even though it's an automated message.
Yeah.
And then, for example, you can set different conditions. You can say, 3 days before check-in, I send them a reminder, of like, hey, it's almost check-in day. Don't forget, read the manual. Here's the phone numbers, etc. You can send people messages after check-in. You can send people messages after they leave, maybe to remind them of a review or something. So there's lots of sort of standard messages that you can send, which I think it's cool. I actually signed up for it because one thing that's challenging for me sometimes is that, I'm always all over the place. I'm sleeping sometimes when people send me messages, but I wanna respond as soon as possible because, when you respond fast, you have a better chance that people will book your place. And it's just very professional. If somebody sends you a message and within 5 minutes they get some sort of reply, then that's better than if they send me a message, I'm sleeping, and 6 hours later I wake up, I see it, and respond.
Yeah, I do all those automated messages too. I like doing it like 55 minutes, so it keeps you at under an hour of response time. So it's like I have the one that's just like thanks for responding. We'll be right with you kind of thing. And then there's all those other ones like, 3 days after or right before the check-in and
But what do you use to send those messages?
So I use Guesty. We had talked about that a little bit, but it seems like Guesty's, they're not like working with one-on-one people anymore. They're working mostly with big time managers or people that have multiple places. So I think they have more money in that now. So they offer kind of a huge blanket of tools. So they have kind of what this Viva IQ place does. And then they have virtual assistants that they work with, and a bunch of other stuff. There's all kinds of accounting and things that I don't fully understand. I need to get another training on their website. But yeah, it's super helpful, especially when you have a lot of places. So
right,
that's a nice thing. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about investing in Airbnb. So imagine there's somebody who has, a few $100,000 and is thinking, okay, I want to invest somewhere in the US and I want to make a nice return. Like, what are some of the things that person should consider?
Yeah. So I've been really focused on the Midwest because of the affordability of it. So I looked at AirDNA, which is a website that they do all the analytics of certain cities, and they can tell you how well, 1 bedrooms rent as opposed to 2 bedrooms. I know you know about this, but just to tell other people, there's just a lot of really good data, and they have a lot that they offer for free, and then you can pay for like a really intense look at something. My only complaint with them is that I'm not necessarily a like charts and numbers person, and so sometimes the data is not easy to digest, but it is helpful. And so I remember reading one of their things where they were saying some of the markets with the best profit margins are Kansas City and Cincinnati, that they're just like overlooked, but they're very affordable and they still get a lot of traffic. And so essentially there are a lot of these second tier cities that, they don't have millions of people, but they might have 300,000 to 700,000 people, and that draws in a lot of traffic. And so you kind of have to figure out the why of why people are coming there, right? So I started in Boulder, which is a college town, and we have 40,000 students here. And so I knew that with students come parents and all kinds of other stuff. So, graduation weekend and parents weekend and just different things. So I knew that at least if I was close to the school, I would have traffic. And people come for all other things, yoga teacher training and driving cross country or whatever. But I knew that I wanted to keep to at least that because that was a big funnel. So keeping close to the school and kind of targeting that market, that's really been helpful. So that's something that's really easy to duplicate. You can look all over and just look at the big universities. And really, it's just a couple of hours doing some research online. So, that was kind of where I started. And then I look at the whys, and it can be a convention center or it can be a popular area. And all of this you can figure out from, doing a lot of Google Maps searches and reading about different neighborhoods. I look at crime maps a lot because I may not understand the complexity of certain areas. And so sometimes those help. They don't tell the whole story. But, even if I'm going to look at an area that's borderline, that's a little bit like it's on the path of being gentrified, but it may not be the highest class neighborhood that exists right now. It's like, I want to know that it's at least safe. And you can see that, in real time. So, there's a lot of ways to analyze it. Yeah. I don't know exactly what you want me to answer, so I'm trying not to
No, this is very helpful, because I know there's a lot of people who are thinking about this, and I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot of research that you can do. There's a lot of information out there. AirDNA is one of them. Everbooked also has a data part, like a market analysis part. So there's a lot of information out there, and like you said, you can do a lot on Google Maps and just doing general research. You can even look on Airbnb and just check out some listings and see how many reviews people have. So
and I do that as well. You know, it's like you got to see how much people can charge for, and see that the area warrants some Airbnb. It doesn't mean that you can't do it if there's no Airbnbs there, but it makes you feel a little more comfortable if you see some traffic. Some action.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because most people, when I talk to them, and they always tell me, well, I'm thinking about starting an Airbnb here, but there's already so many of them out there, so, and I think the other way around. If I see a lot of Airbnb somewhere, then I'm thinking, okay, there must be a little demand. So this is a good place to be.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's, people talk about abundance mindset and scarcity mindset. I think that's kind of like seeing your shadow and being afraid and then just going back into your hole. It's like, you can't know unless you try, but you got to just get out there and know that what you have is something unique. Everybody has a different personality, a different way of decorating, a different energy, and people are attracted to different things. So if you put it out there and offer something new, people are going to like it. So I think it's totally worth trying. Yeah.
I think another thing that's important to think about is the local regulations before you buy somewhere.
Sure. That's definitely something to look into. And I look into that as well. Yeah. And sometimes it's a little less clear, because so many places don't have any regulations yet, and you don't really know what's going to happen down the road, or they're just really gray area. So that can be tough. But you did say, for someone who only has 200,000, even in Boulder, we used to be a pretty cheap place, but we've gotten very popular, and you can't even buy a 1-bedroom apartment for 200,000, and a house here goes for probably 800,000 if you're looking for something decent. And so it's compared to one of those cities in the Midwest. I mean, for 200,000, you could buy a fourplex. So I'm just going, well, there's a lot of possibility, and the one thing that I would say to people, it's not like a no-go. But for me, I'm never buying a condo again that has an HOA. So I kind of recommend that people look at single family homes, or looking at owning a duplex or a fourplex. Own your own building, because once people have control or say over what you can do with it, then you're going to run into problems. So that's even aside from the regulation of the city, is just other people that want to tell you no.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because, one thing is looking at the current regulations, but another thing is to think about, what's going to change in the future. And so I think the safest bet is to just get a separate building, right? Because then the neighbors are not right next to you. So you have, less of a chance that they will complain. And, I think in terms of regulations, it's in most places, I don't think they've banned renting out your own house like a separate building in many places. And maybe there are some, but mostly they target the condos, the apartments, and those type of units.
Yeah.
So I think that's really good advice. And then also a question that I had is, do you get mortgages for those places, or do you just pay cash for the houses?
So in the past, I've paid cash. It was just, it just worked out that way. It was it's so much easier. There's so much less red tape when you're just buying cash. You can buy it very quickly. You can get really good deals. So for that, I was looking for investors that would invest with me, and I bought cash. But now I have been looking at the mortgage route, and, I think that's a really good way to go too, because you can leverage your money. So that same house that maybe you would have paid $60,000 for, you only have to pay 12. So that makes it a really easy entry for a lot of people, because there are a lot of people out there that just kind of have that money, or they have access to it. You could even put it on a credit card and get a year of 0% interest, and then make that back in a year, because of Airbnb being just as good as it is. So there are a lot of ways to make it happen if you're creative.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think if you get a mortgage, your return on investment can really go through the roof, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because
you can
the
get
interest rates,
45% or something.
Yeah, because the interest rates are just so low.
Yeah, they really are. It's just, do you qualify? For me, it was really tough for a while, because I've been running my own business for 4.5 years. And then it's when you run your own business, at least in the US, I don't know how your taxes work, but it's really nice to deduct as much as you can. And so that was one of the perks of this, is that I can deduct all of my living expenses. I can deduct my Netflix and my toilet paper and anything that that has to do with my house. So whether or not I'm using it or a guest's using it, I can add that to it. So it makes my overhead really low, but it also looks like I make a lot less money because I'm deducting as much as possible. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just different. When you're self-employed, it's not as easy to get a mortgage. They want to see the W-2 and they want to see that you've had the same job for 4 years and that you make the exact same amount of money or even a little more. And my business has fluctuated a lot. I mean, it's definitely on the up and up, but it's just one of those things that it's like, I don't necessarily want to go and have to prove myself to somebody and show them all of my bank accounts. And it's just a lot. So I guess I've been a little resistant to the normal path that people take. I've always been like creative.
Yeah, that's cool. And do you do anything else now? Is this a full-time thing for you, or do you still have other interests in businesses and jobs?
This is pretty much my full-time thing now. I mean, I have a lot of different avenues that I do with this Airbnb stuff. I teach people how to invest. I invest with people. I'm furnishing places for people. I manage places for people. And I also am doing a little bit of coaching with people one-on-one just to teach them about how to come up with a business that you can automate. So it doesn't have to be Airbnb, and it doesn't even have to be something that you're super passionate about. You can create something that just makes money for you, that gives you the time and freedom to just go and do your passion project if that's something that doesn't make money. So I think, I just want people to feel like they can be free and that they can dream big and believe in all the possibilities. Because, when I got started with real estate, I was looking for mentors, and people love to tell you like, oh, well, I was able to do it, but you will never figure it out, And I just want everyone to know that it's like, it's totally doable. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you have no money. Like, all you need to do is want it, and you can definitely figure it out. So yeah, I think I just want to support people.
Very cool. Well, we've been talking for a while, so we're getting to the end of the episode. But can you tell people how they can find out more about you? Maybe some people want to reach out to you and ask some questions, or maybe people have units that they're looking for somebody to manage.
Yeah. I am working on my website, but I think by the time this airs, it will be done. So it's just my first and last name, ZeonaMcIntyre.com. But yeah, up until this point, I just had been working like with friends and friends of friends, but it's been really fun to open that up and work with more people. So I definitely welcome, people to reach out to me. My email is also ZA and McIntyre, like my last name, at Gmail. So yeah, if anybody wants to reach out, that'd be great.
Awesome. And I'll put those things in the show notes so people can look back at the show notes and find your contact information and all the stuff that we talked about, the resources and the tools that we mentioned as well. So thanks a lot, Zeona. It was a great talk, and I wish you all the luck with your business and everything in the future.
Great. Thank you so much.
And
this was fun.
And before I finish this episode, I just wanted to let you guys know I've started being pretty active on Instagram. I find it very fun. I've never really been into it too much, but now I've kind of figured out how it works, and I've already got like over 2,000 people following me on Instagram. So if you're on Instagram, it's Get Paid for Your Pad, but that's my account, and I share every day. I share something, whether it be something about my listing, some tips, or some actual screenshots of how I'm doing, and all sorts of other stuff. So if you're interested, then go ahead and follow me there, and you can also send me messages, by the way. So with that, we've come to the end of the episode. So thanks everybody for listening, and we'll be back next week.
Get paid for your pad. 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 Get paid for your pad.